You've decided it's time to adjust your tension. You've checked the rest of your machine. You're sure it's nothing to do with anything else on your machine. So it's most likely that you've decided to change to a different thread, or you're using some vastly different fabric or something. Or perhaps you have a vintage machine or a machine that's new to you that has never worked well, and you just want to see if perhaps it is the tension. One thing to do before you start is to write down where you started. That way, if none of this works, you can set it right back to where you started and try other things. So that's my very first tip. Always know where you started so you can set things back to where they were before you started playing with the tension. The next thing I want to point out is the needle and the bobbin tension are not equal. They are balanced, but if you are to pull on them, and I'm going to put the presser foot down because remember, you're not going to get the actual needle tension unless your presser foot is down. This tension or pull is a lot harder or higher than the bobbin tension. These tension settings turn into a balanced stitch. If you think about it, the bobbin doesn't have to do much pulling. The needle thread has to pull that bobbin thread up into the fabric, so it makes sense that the needle tension has to be a little higher. So don't think that you're going to be doing anything about feeling how they feel here. It's all going to be how they look on your fabric when you do the sewing. So that's how you can tell whether the tension is balanced. One last thing to note before we start is that if you have thin fabric, there isn't room for that interlocking to happen completely within the fabric itself. You're going to get some see-through on both sides. You will have some of the bobbin thread poking up on the top and some of the needle thread poking down on the bottom, because there's just not room in between the fabric to fit. If you're using the same color thread in both the needle and the bobbin, you're really not going to notice this. But if you happen to be doing the adjustment like I am with two different color threads, just know that you're not going to get it to completely disappear. Try to just get an equal amount showing on both sides. If you do need to use two different color threads in your needle and in your bobbin, it is okay to pick that you do not want one to show on the top and have the other one show on the bottom. This one is adjusted so it shows mostly on the bottom. If you let it adjust too far that way, your stitch could easily pull out because it won't be locked in as well. But in this case, you can see it's still pretty locked in there. It's not going to pull out easily. If it ends up more like the case of these stitches in the middle where the thread is just lying across and the other stitches are coming away on the other side, that's not quite as a secure stitch. So let's get down to the part where it's confusing. How to adjust the tension when it's incorrect. Remember, the correct tension is when the loops are in between and when one side pulls harder than the other. So if this side pulls too hard, the loop comes to the top, right? And this is the side where it pulled too hard, the top pulled too hard, and there are the loops on the top. If the bottom pulled too hard, pull, 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 it would pull the top thread through and the loops would be on the bottom. The tricky part comes in the fact that on sewing machines, the bobbin thread tension isn't generally adjustable. On some machines, on bottom loading bobbin machines, it can be, and I have a separate video on that, but for this video, we're going to assume that the bobbin tension is fine because really 99.9% of the time it is just fine and you cannot adjust it. So we're going to go with that. You cannot adjust this bobbin tension on the bottom. So any adjustments you have to make are on the needle tension. And that's the dial that you have on your machine to adjust the top thread or needle tension. So we have to think of adjusting based only on whether you're going to adjust this needle tension tighter or looser. So if you have loops on the top, that means the needle tension was higher than the bobbin tension, so you need to lower the needle tension. On the machines, the needle tension is generally numbers, and the higher the number, the stronger or higher the tension. Think of it just like weights. If we were putting weights on, the higher the number, the higher, the stronger the weight, the harder the pull is. So in that case, when the needle tension was too high, we would lower the needle tension and see how that worked. We will run through doing this in just a second, but let's go back to our box. So if the loops were on top, the needle tension is too high, so we had to lower the needle tension. If the loops are on the bottom, like this, we could think of it as the bobbin tension being too high, but instead we're going to think of it as the needle tension being too low. It's not strong enough to pull the bobbin thread up into the middle. So in this case, the needle tension is too low, and we would want to raise it so it would pull harder to pull that bobbin thread into the middle. So if the loops are on the top, lower the needle tension. If the loops are on the bottom, raise the needle tension. If I have a machine that's new to me and I think there's something wrong with the tension, I generally start by setting it at normal. On old machines, there's usually a little red mark that shows you where normal is. On this machine, it looks like there's a range here of normal, so I would start right there in the middle. My steps for doing tension adjustments is, again, to make sure everything is threaded correctly, including the bobbin. Just sew a line. And look at the stitching and see if there are loops on one side or the other. I happen to have it easy because I have two different colors threaded in my machine, so I know which is the top and the bottom, but you would want to make sure you keep track of what the top and the bottom is. In this case, you can see that there are loops on the bottom, so that means I want my needle thread to pull harder to bring those loops up into the fabric. So I want to raise my needle tension, and I'm just going to raise it one setting, only one setting at a time. So I had it set on 4, I'm going to just raise it to 5. It brought it up some. That might be the best I can do there. I'm going to take it up one more time to see if it gets any better. I think that's going to be as balanced as I can get. So again, in this case, I can't get rid of all the dots because the fabric is too thin. There's not enough space for that interlocking to happen in between the fabric layers. So I'm just looking to see if I can get the dots to be about equal on both sides. And if I had matching thread in the top and the bottom, you wouldn't be seeing these dots. I think that's about equal now. The dots are about equal on both sides. So I would call that balanced tension. I'm going to set my tension really tight on this machine so you can see what the loops would look like on the top. We'll show you a few different things of what they would look like if tension is incorrect. So let's set my needle tension really, really high. On this machine, I don't really get loops on the top. It's not that much different. But sometimes you would get loops. For example, and this is a good point to show you, I'm going to take my bobbin thread here, and it's not threaded through the tension spring now, so there's no tension at all on my bobbin thread. And that, again, looks like a tension issue when it's really just a threading issue. This is the same tension setting on the needle thread, but I just did not thread my bobbin thread. And I have a stitch that's not even very good because I can just take this needle thread and pull it right out because the tension is so bad. Okay, I've threaded my bobbin thread correctly again, and now I'm going to take my tension on my needle thread all the way down to 0, and we'll look at what that looks like. There are all those loops. You can see lots of loops on the bottom. Let's take it down not quite so extremely so you can see the loops a little bit better. Let's just put it at like a 1.5 maybe. Little less loops. And 3. And the loops are slowly disappearing. And if I kept on raising the tension, I would slowly get it back to my balanced stitch up here. If you end up adjusting the tension all the way to one end and it's not solving the problem, it's probably that the tension is not the issue. So again, put the tension back to where you started and go looking for other problems that might be happening on your machine. And again, just to summarize, if the loops are on the bottom, that means the needle tension, the pull is not hard enough to pull everything up into the middle, so you need to raise the needle tension to a higher number. If the loops are on the top, you need to lower the number because the needle tension is pulling too hard. It's pulling things up to the top. So I hope that helps. Good luck.